What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my next 10 reviews, a video I like to make every couple of months or so to keep people informed on what I am working on, and also what new releases I'll be taking a look at, etc. Now this in particular is, I think, a more important one than usual because July and August are going to be quite slow for new releases, whereas things seem to be primed to pick up in September. But this video is covering July and August in particular, and of course what's left of June here. So that means games like Stalker 2 or Space Marine 2 that are slated for anything past August aren't on the list, so something to keep in mind there as well. But otherwise, this particular one is going to be a lot of older titles since there are so few releases, or at least full game releases, coming over the next 2 months. But before we dive into the bulk of the video, an important thing to mention is that if you watched my last video on this particular subject, there is one game on that I have not yet reviewed, and that is We Happy Few. And I'm actually done with that game pretty much already. I'm basically just needing to make the actual review. So you'll be seeing that one from me pretty quickly. But seeing as it was such an odd duck of a game, I didn't really feel the need to do like a first impressions and whatnot for it. So you'll simply see the review for that quite soon. But that does bring me to what the actual bulk of this video is meant to be about, which is the next few reviews. And we're going to get started pretty much immediately because one day after this video is going live, on June 18th, we have the release of Still Wakes the Deep and a DLC for Warhammer 40k Boltgun. And I'm going to be reviewing the full game for Boltgun and Still Wakes the Deep. Going to focus on Still Wakes the Deep first, simply because it's new, followed of course by Boltgun. So let's start with Still Wakes the Deep. This is a narrative game about a disaster on an oil rig off the coast of Scotland. Our job is to navigate this collapsing rig in an attempt to save both ourselves, obviously, and anyone else we might be able to save along the way, as we'll be battling both the weather and, of course, otherworldly horrors of some description, as we learn sort of what exactly happened here. So, this game should not take me long at all. I think the entire game is supposed to come in at like a little under 10 hours, and these narrative games in general don't tend to be very hard to 100%, so this is just a little something different that I wanted to check out and see what it was all about. But then we have Boltgun, of course. Now, Boltgun technically released last year, and it was a very well-received boomer shooter, of course set in the Warhammer 40k universe. Now, I wanted to play it when it launched, but I didn't really have time when that happened. But on the same day of Still Wakes the Deep, they're releasing a DLC for it that's supposed to add some more content to it, and I figure that's probably about as good of an opportunity as I'm going to get to jump back into this thing since the next few months are pretty light anyway. But honestly, I've been playing so many RPGs for so long that the occasional short game where I can just shoot some stuff is actually pretty appealing on occasion. And moreover, I've been getting into Warhammer 40k quite a bit since the announcement of Rogue Trader, and then it just kind of spiraled into other games from there, so I've also just been wanting to play it for that. Either way though, this is another relatively short experience. I don't know how long the DLC is, but 100%ing the base game is estimated at about 15 hours, so that one's not likely to take me very long either. But moving on a little bit, but still keeping with the new releases, we then have Flintlock, Siege of Dawn, an upcoming action title that's kind of billing itself as a Souls-light title. That is to say it has very minor elements of a Souls-like, but is mostly action, and in my opinion plays a bit closer to something like God of War. And while I initially was simply curious about the aesthetic of it and also a little bit about the story of the undead coming up through the door to the great below, as they call it, what really sold it for me was a recent demo during Steam Next Fest where I got obviously a hands-on impression, and it was much better than I was expecting, to be frank. So naturally going to keep with the plan to check that one out. And that one is releasing on July 18th. But then we have Black Myth Wukong, coming on August 20th. This is an action RPG rooted, of course, in Chinese mythology via the Journey to the West novel. Now, visually, this game looks stunning, and what they've shown of the combat also looks particularly great, and that's clearly where the focus of the title is, though I am admittedly curious if it manages to do anything else really well or interesting, or if it's simply going to be a really fun hack and slash, which honestly I wouldn't be opposed to, but we'll ultimately see what happens there. Now, last up for the new releases, we have Star Wars Outlaws on August 30th. Now, I think this one is going to be a little bit interesting because the story of this one sees us playing as Kay Vess, a smuggler on their way to perform a great heist, which obviously involves a bit of setup. And the reason I want to play this one is because honestly, when it comes to Star Wars, I'm just so tired of Jedi and Sith stories that have been very, very played out. and I think that setting can do more than that, so anything that is attempting to do that has my interest, which is why I want to play Outlaws, especially after a recent preview. But as interesting as that premise and everything is for me, I think this game is likely going to struggle against its price point of a base $70, and then I think the expensive deluxe edition is like $130, which just seems outrageous to me, especially since it doesn't really look like this game is attempting to do anything like groundbreaking, so trying to justify that $70 price tag I think is going to be a challenge for it, even if the game itself winds up being pretty fun. But that brings me to the rest of the old stuff, the stuff that is already released and I simply would like to take a look back at for one reason or another, and the first game up on that list is none other than my personal favorite, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. This game finally got its final DLC, which means I would like to run back through the game, both to have one last playthrough for myself, but also to take a complete look at it now that it's had several years worth of patches and DLC added, and kind of see what that experience looks like from the perspective of a full playthrough now. What's more though, along the way I would like to record all that footage and then finally do a story video for that game as well, which is going to be a labor-intensive endeavor, mostly because I imagine capturing all of the Mythic Path footage will be a pain, because I recently discovered that some of my older Mythic Path save files are not all working very well. So I'm not exactly looking forward to that, even if I am very much so looking forward to playing through the game. Now this is likely going to be what I'm going to jump into right after Still Wakes the Deep and Boltgun. That way I can give myself basically all of July to do this if I absolutely need it, but hopefully it will only take a couple of weeks to do everything I would like to do, because then we can move on to some stuff that I have not played, but I've really wanted to. For starters, a review for Fallout 3. Now technically speaking, this is the only Fallout I have not reviewed as far as the mainline series goes, but I also need to re-review 4 at some point because that was one of my very first videos, period, and well, the less said about it the better. But nonetheless, I haven't played Fallout 3 for myself in any meaningful capacity. I have played it here and there with friends, but I've hardly experienced even the bulk of the content. And it's about time I actually got around to covering it on the channel, as there's a great bit of that game I would like to experience, frankly, such as some of the DLCs like Mothership Zeta or Point Lookout, and of course some of the iconic quests from that game as well. Now I already know the main story is pretty bad, in particular the ending, but otherwise looking forward to experiencing that one. Then after that, we're likely going to be doing Drakensang, the River of Time, the prequel, technically, to the original game, Drakensang the Dark Eye, a game I just very recently finished reviewing, and I enjoyed my trip through that original title so much, and I noticed that pretty much everyone sings the praises of the second entry in that CRPG series, claiming it's better in pretty much every way, which really makes me want to play it. So I'm going to, but also it's a CRPG channel, so no surprises there, I imagine. Nonetheless, these games use Germany's Dark Eye TTRPG system, and I was pleasantly surprised by its implementation in a video game in the last entry, not least of which because it was new to me personally, so I just really want to check out the sequel. Now, second to last, we then have Phantom Doctrine, a TRPG I've been meaning to check out for a while. Phantom Doctrine is a stealth-based, turn-based tactics game set during the Cold War. Now, espionage is the name of the game here. I think probably the easiest way to describe it to people would simply be, think a more stealth-based XCOM, and I've heard some good things about it, but I've personally not played it. But TRPGs have become a sort of secondary main genre of the channel, so it's one of those games I've been trying to cross off my list for a while, and now is as good a time as any to get to it, which does bring me to the final entry of this list, which is none other than Fable 1, my personal favorite of the original Fable trilogy, and truth be told, the most readily available of them, and I have very fond memories of it. In fact, I 100% the anniversary edition when it was released a decade ago, and not to bum anybody out, but I mean the anniversary edition was released a decade ago, with the original title being released all the way back in 2004, so I thought it would be fun to take a look back at it before eventually getting to the other two titles as well, mostly to just cover them for the channel, but also to refresh my memory a bit on the entirety of the original trilogy before the reboot is supposed to launch next year. Because while I have played played these games, it's been quite some time ago, and I would like a good baseline to compare the reboot to properly when it winds up dropping, which is why I'm taking a look back at this one. But that is pretty much probably all I'm going to have time for, maybe overshooting it a little bit over the next couple of months, but that's what the current plan looks like. And then once September rolls around, it starts to get much busier with things like Stalker 2, Space Marine 2, Inotria launching, and then hopefully some things will actually get some release dates at some point so I can plan a little better, but for right now that's what we're looking at. So if you're looking forward to any of these reviews, or if you have any opinions on them as it stands, by all means drop them down in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you think about them, which of course means to like, comment, and subscribe. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.